Good afternoon, dear viewers. This is the Ruslan Bailov channel, where today we will examine the development of the situation in Ukraine as of December 12, 2025. The day turned out to be filled with significant events, so let's proceed directly to the review. First of all, let's turn our attention to the northeastern districts of Kharkiv Oblast, including the Kupyansk and Vovchansk directions, as well as adjacent areas. In the extreme northeastern points of Kharkiv Oblast, offensive movement of Russian troops is being recorded. The map has undergone the following changes over the past 24 hours. According to various cartographic resources, the Russian army has significantly strengthened its lines and is gradually creating an encirclement of the settlement of Myrnohrad from both northern and southern directions. In parallel, Russian troops are advancing toward the village of Dvorichna. These strategically important settlements are located along a transport corridor, representing a wide logistical highway, which could subsequently serve Russian troops for deepening advancement into the northeastern regions of Kharkiv Oblast. Numerous reports are coming from the Kupyansk direction, the first thing we've already touched upon. According to information from the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces, the village of Huliipole today came under full Russian control. The corresponding correction has been entered on the map. On the other hand, significant changes have occurred in the northwestern and western parts of Kupyansk. Just yesterday, on December 11, 2025, the map had the following appearance. Today, a large-scale correction is being made, according to which Ukrainian forces managed to restore control over more than 60% of western Kupyansk. This information is being disseminated by a number of sources, particularly pro-Ukrainian cartographic resources. They are proposing such a significant correction. Of course, in the morning, when this news appeared, it was difficult to believe. However, closer to the evening of December 12, 2025, Ukrainian sources began publishing video footage. The frames show the president of Ukraine standing at the southwestern entrance to Kupyansk, in the area of the Huliipole micro-district. In these frames, Zelensky states that Ukrainian forces practically completely managed to clear the western part of Kupyansk, and Ukrainian troops continue offensive operations. At the present moment, it is very difficult to determine where exactly the front line runs in western Kupyansk. Pro-Russian sources have not yet commented on this video footage in any way. Everyone is probably trying to detect inconsistencies or prove the archival nature of the video. But it appears that at the present time, the Ukrainian side has indeed organized a series of counter-offensive operations with the goal of completely clearing all of western Kupyansk. There is an extremely high probability that in the near future, the Ukrainian side will increase pressure on Russian positions located in the western part of the city. Here now, according to data from both pro-Russian and pro-Ukrainian sources, the most fierce clashes are occurring. We observe how Ukrainian troops are trying to clear the western bank of the Oskol River, while Russian units continue clearing the eastern bank. Next, we move to the Siversk direction. Yesterday, I remind you, we discussed the situation in this city. I told you that at the time of material preparation, there were still no 100% confirmations of full Russian control over Siversk. Numerous video recordings were published where Russian servicemen were raising flags in different districts of the city. But closer to the evening, approximately at 22 to 23 hours yesterday, several more video materials appeared, confirming that Russian units indeed managed to completely clear Siversk. The defense of the Ukrainian armed forces in this sector collapsed. Ukrainian units are retreating westward toward the settlement of Sloviansk. The map in this direction changed as follows over the last several days. The offensive in this sector developed at truly rapid pace. Daily we made corrections of 20 to 15% of the city in favor of the Russian army or the grey zone. Moreover, most importantly, not only was all of Siversk cleared by Russian units over the last 2 days, the Russian army managed to advance further west on the heels of retreating Ukrainian units. Today, Ukrainian sources are publishing video footage that was geolocated somewhat north of the village of Pokrovsk and somewhat southwest of Siversk. In these frames, we see how Ukrainian units from the 54th Brigade are striking advancing Russian troops. One of the strikes was geolocated precisely at this point. Based on these frames, we made a correction, and now we see that the Russian army is rapidly moving further west. At the present moment, Russian units have one task before them: to bypass from the flank the network of strong points of the Ukrainian armed forces located between the villages of Sviatopokrovskoye and Reznikovka. That is, we are talking about these strong points, which are located precisely between these two red lines with arrows. Now, the defense of the Ukrainian armed forces is based precisely in this sector. In the event that the Russian army manages to quickly pass this direction, it will be possible to speak about the beginning of combat operations for Sloviansk. Perhaps in this direction, after the clearing of Siversk, a small operational pause will begin, which may be connected with the fact that Russian units after Siversk may switch to the settlement of Lyman, in order to complete combat operations for this city as well, before beginning operations for Sloviansk. As for Constantinovka, we discussed this. The chief of the general staff reports that 45% of the city has already been cleared. From the Pokrovsk direction, news is coming predominantly from Myrnohrad, and there are changes. Also, news is coming from the settlements of Molodetsko and Novopodgorodnoye. Yesterday, video material was received from this point. A recoloring of the map occurred as follows. All this territory came under Russian control over yesterday. Today, news is coming so far that Russian troops took two streets, the eastern streets of this settlement, under full control, pushed back the AFU, and the central part is now mostly in the grey zone. But nevertheless, assault operations of this settlement continue here, and the AFU are trying to counterattack and push back Russian troops in this combat sector. Also, FPV drones from the AFU side are actively working against Russian positions in the area of the village of Novopodgorodnoye. Perhaps here as well, serious changes await us in the coming days. I remind you that this is precisely where the border between Dnipropetrovsk Oblast and Donetsk Oblast runs. And Russian troops are now storming Novopodgorodnoye, which is located precisely in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Also, active combat sectors here are Udakhnoye, Kotlino, and Sergeyevka. In the area of Udakhnoye and Kotlino, the AFU do not abandon attempts to strike Russian positions using FPV drones. Also, earlier news came from here that the AFU are counterattacking here with infantry units, but they were unable to advance here and were also unable to push back Russian troops. Also, reports are coming that Russian troops continue to strike AFU positions in the area of the village of Sergeyevka. Here, FPV drones are working against AFU temporary deployment points. And also, FPV drones are working against AFU temporary deployment points against AFU positions in the area of the village of Grishino. But no advancement was recorded here today, at least at the time of video recording. And let's move to Myrnohrad. In Myrnohrad, the situation with this video clip has finally become clear. Yesterday we talked about it. That video material came from this point, on which Russian troops advanced toward the central part of Myrnohrad. I marked the map yesterday in this way. All this territory yesterday came under Russian control. Also, there were some assumptions that Russian troops entered from the side of the village of Rovnoye in this way. But it turned out that the territory marked in red today precisely came under full Russian control, and all this territory marked in red is territory that came under Russian control over yesterday. Also, video material came from this point. Here Russian aviation was working, here FABs arrived at AFU temporary deployment points. Earlier we colored the map in this way. All territory marked in red came under Russian control. But nevertheless, there was an arrival of FABs at AFU temporary deployment points. Thereby, we can draw conclusions that this territory marked in yellow color is not fully controlled by Russian military, despite the fact that earlier video materials were already received on which forward Russian positions were located at these points. Also, video material came from this point, on which forward Russian positions were located. Nevertheless, AFU positions were located here. Now reports are coming that the AFU are surrendering en masse, as they are completely cut off from supply. And according to statistics that appeared online, the last rotation was carried out in October. An armored vehicle managed to leave Myrnohrad. And also in December, several fighters managed to leave Myrnohrad. And that's it. After this, there was no rotation. The AFU can neither exit nor enter from here. Thereby, fierce combat operations continue here now, and the ring in Myrnohrad is gradually tightening. Perhaps by the end of this week, or by the middle of next week, Myrnohrad will come under Russian control. But let's not speculate and beat around the bush. We continue to monitor the situation in this combat sector and move further to the Dvorichna salient. From the Dvorichna salient today, a huge amount of news has arrived. The news mainly concerns strikes against AFU positions. Here, the front line has become very active. Russian troops are striking AFU positions in the area of villages Sukhotskoye, Belitskoye, Novy Donbass, Shevchenko, Dvorichna, Volnoye, Novaya Shakova, Ivanovka. Also, arrivals were recorded in the area of the village of Kucherov Yar and Sofievka. As for Shakovo, Vladimirovka and Sofievka, here again the situation is contradictory from both sides. Pro-Russian sources again assert that Shakovo and Vladimirovka are under Russian control. Assault operations of Sofievka are now underway. But no confirming information is coming from here. Pro-Ukrainian sources report that in Shakovo everything is stable. Shakovo is under AFU control, and the AFU are not allowing Russian troops to advance in this combat sector and are even counter-attacking. No advancement was recorded here today, but nevertheless fierce combat operations are underway here. Also, Russian aviation was working in the area of the village of Torskoye. Worked yesterday, worked today. And also yesterday and today, aviation worked against AFU positions in the area of the village of Dvorichna. That's the news here for today. We move further along the map. On the Constantinovka direction, there are changes. News is coming. As for changes occurred in the area of the village of Pleshchayevka. Finally, confirming materials arrived that Pleshchayevka completely came under Russian control. I remind you that it possibly came under Russian control much earlier. Maybe a week ago, maybe a month ago it came under Russian control, but only today did confirming materials arrive about the expansion of the control zone in favor of the Russian army and the clearing of this settlement. Also, earlier reports came from here that fierce combat operations are underway in the area of the Kleban-Bik reservoir, somewhere in this territory, and Russian troops are striking AFU positions in the area of the village of Berostok, and also active combat operations are being conducted north of the village of Yablonovka. Yablonovka is located here, and to the north, the AFU here have fortification lines and AFU positions that do not allow Russian forces to advance in the direction of the village of Constantinovka. Also today, arrivals from Russian aviation were recorded in the area of the village of Ilyanovka, and there were arrivals from Russian aviation against Constantinovka itself. There is information that Russian troops control 45% of the structures in Constantinovka, but it is still unclear how much this information corresponds to reality. Pro-Russian sources assure that here 45% of structures, 45% of this settlement, are actually controlled by Russian military. Of Constantinovka itself, no advancement is being recorded here today. And also the situation with the villages of Maiskoye, Verolyubovka, Klinovoye and Bezimyanoye has not yet been clarified. There are no changes here yet, despite the fact that the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation announced that Maiskoye came under Russian control. Klinovoye and Bezimyanoye also came under Russian control. And also there was news that Russian troops are conducting assault operations of the village of Verolyubovka. Also, news came today from pro-Ukrainian sources that Ukrainian military are counter-attacking in the direction of the village of Chasiv Yar. I remind you that recently the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation announced that Chervonoy also came under RF Armed Forces control. But the front line is not changing here, as no confirming materials have been received. I'm not saying that here Russian troops do not control all this territory. We simply are not applying changes to the map, as the information came in the form of news. As soon as confirming information arrives, we will apply changes to the map and tell you about everything. That's the news here for today. We move further along the map. On the Zaporizhzhia sector of the front, Russian units are advancing into the central part of Huliipole. Today, many important reports are coming from this direction. Let's look at how the dynamics developed in this sector. The maps looked like this as recently as December 9, 2025. This was the last day of combat operations on the eastern bank of the Haicha River. Already on December 11th, the first information arrives that Russian units managed to force the river, and the process of consolidation along Velika Street began. The first frames of objective control began to appear, which confirm the presence of Russian units on the Ukrainian side of the river. And already today, December 12th, a large number of corrections are arriving, provided by various neutral cartographic services, according to which Velika Street is almost completely under Russian army control. Moreover, Russian units managed to force the Huliipole River in the central part, and at the present moment, combat operations are already being conducted for the central part of Huliipole. We see that the defense of the Ukrainian armed forces in this sector is not holding. There is a high probability that in the near future, Huliipole will undergo significant changes, and possibly by the end of the year, this city will be finally cleared. And that's all, dear friends. Thank you for watching, subscribe to the channel, leave your likes, and all the best to you.